and I'm looking at, oh, what, I've had a great staff, and I was standing there saying, you know, what am I going to be known for? You know, what is my legacy? What am I, that computer I took for the cover of the XYZ annual report, you know, I mean, is that what they're going to hold up at my, you know, in my funeral or whatever it is? I said, you know, I don't want, you know, I said, I got into this, you know, we go to school for it, we learn it, you know, we start taking pictures so that we can do something, again, I'm going to use the word relevant.
My name is Michelangelo. I am the creative director of IG Boston. And IG Boston, in short, is basically a photography community that tries to promote New England photographers and try to give them the encouragement to create. Because in our sense, we feel that all creative artists need an outlet. And part of that outlet is having support from your peers, from your colleagues, from your friends to make sure that you're encouraged to keep doing your work. Because I feel as an artist, we all desire an audience. We all desire an avenue to show our work and make sure it's appreciated. So here what we try to do is try to be a bit more proactive. Instead of just you know, giving photographers an attaboy, we try to promote functions, do encouragement, provide feedback to make sure that the photographer knows or the creative artist knows in this community they have a group of people that's willing and able to support them. Doing this thing for a while, like about 4 years now. And I feel it's important to do the work just because I believe in Boston and I believe that there is a vibrant creative community here, and I want to make sure I do what I can to keep that flourished and make sure that's a bit more prominent. So the reason why we're here today, hello? All right, cool. So the reason why we're here today is that part of our objective to encourage photographers is to give them insight about how other photographers, other creatives in the field have may advance themselves or put themselves in better positions or more prominence, being able to do more exciting work, be able to experiment with their art a bit more. So part of this function was to invite a couple of accomplished, talented photographers who have done amazing things with their work and hopefully provide some insight to the community here to see what it took for them to get to that point and how we can kind of bridge the gaps between hobbyist photographers doing social media and photographers doing more professional work. So that is the purpose here today. And after the end of the event, we'll have questions and feedback if you have any questions about how we do our thing or there are questions for the photographers directly. So I guess with that, I'll let the photographers introduce themselves and we'll get right to it.
I think I'm supposed to start, so it's just alphabetical. I'm sorry, but anyway, I'm Lou Jones, and because I'm the first, I think I'm going to set a little tone about. Shree and I were talking about. We only can speak from our own experience about this evolution about making it, but. I'll start with, let's see, I'm a photographer. Now that may seem obvious, we're in a room probably with a lot of photographers, but to be very specific, that's all I do. I don't have, as my mother said, get a real job. I don't have another source of income. I don't make my money from real estate. I don't have a partner. I don't have someone who's going to enhance my income in any way. And I don't have a trust fund. So if that finger is not going up and down, there's no money coming in. So it's very important. So this is me, and we all know that this is part of the new world, the things that are up there. But as I said, I'm a photographer, and most of my work is big productions. I work for ad agencies and design studios and things like that. So we do big jobs with, you know, this was a shot for FedEx in Alaska. So we bring lots of equipment, trunks and trunks of equipment. This was freezing cold. I looked like the Michelin Man. I had so many layers of underwear on. and things like that. But it's Alaska, you know, clients, we can't live with them, we can't kill them. But whose idea it was to shoot in Alaska in freezing cold weather a job like this. But this is the kind of thing, this is the kind of production, huge productions that we do. So we travel around. A lot of our work, this is a Fortune 500 client. We travel, like, as I said, with lots and lots of equipment. This is New York City, Times Square, permits, police detail, renting equipment, lots of assistants in the background to do these kinds of photographs. And that's where my career began. So I was using 8x10 cameras, 4x5 cameras, 2 1/4. Some of the young people who may see this have never heard of those things, but film. You know, dark rooms are. I heard that there were people that had no idea what dark rooms were anymore. And at some point, in order to have some feeling for making my own career, I decided that I wanted to travel. I wanted my photography to be done in places around the world. This is in St. Petersburg, Russia. We did a book for a client, an ad agency in Connecticut. So this is midnight in St. Petersburg, Russia. And it shows a lot of how the travel. So at this point, I had an intern last year, NYU film school intern, and I told her, I came back, flew back, and I said, I just put a push pin in my 60th foreign country on assignment. 60. I said, do you know how long it takes to do that? And she went to me, what's a push pin? Anyway, so the projects became more and more complex. This is from Rio Olympics, Rio in Brazil. I've done it at last count 13 Olympics, and that is a big part of what we've done. So we've gone out, traveled all over the world to photograph the Olympics. Now, that means that we've gone from this big production commercial work, we've included design studios, but we've also started to work, well, this is a long time ago, but we started to work for editorial clients. We've been doing National Geographic and Time magazine. These are completely different paradigms in order to expand our lives. Now, the reason I'm showing these photographs is because if you look at them, they all have something in common. Not the most obvious, but the fact that they all require what I call a gatekeeper. And I'm going to talk a lot about that. Somebody who says, you take your little portfolio, you show it to a designer at an ad agency, and you say, they pass. You can work for us, you can do this job, we trust you, or you ain't worth nothing. And that's an incredible thing that we've gone through in our time. This is going to marry into the social networking. Anyway. So what happened was these gatekeepers continually became a matter of consternation in a career that you're trying to create. So we tried to move a little bit and start doing the fine art thing. We started to moving into museums, galleries, institutions that had some kind of exhibition space. And that was part of the career. The commercial stuff we were still doing, but we were now doing something very different. But you still have gatekeepers. You still have gallerists, curators, those kinds of people who are going to on your photographs. in an effort to have more control on my career, on what kinds of subject matters I did, we started doing this kind of work, which has become a major part of the studio. We call them long-term projects. We take on subject matters that we're interested in, that we're passionate about, and we could care less whether or not we have an assignment, at least in the beginning. That was the case. So this is a death penalty. We did 2 books on the death penalty. We traveled all over the country, 14 death rows, 27 people. This man was executed in Texas, and we photographed him. So we've done these long-term, non-derivative projects in order to have control. This is a lot with the social media, but this is sort of pre-social media. So we had control over what things we were interested in, what I'm pointing my camera at. So we have now where it started to go into the beginnings of social media. Social media, we call it social media. It's sort of a highfalutin term now, but you know, back in the day it was, if you had to have a website to be considered even professional. So we used email. This is the first time. First time we could email people and contact them almost immediately, halfway around the world. It was really an amazing phenomenon, social media. But as soon as social media started to be strong enough to support photographs, there was a major, at least from my viewpoint, a major paradigm shift that we could put photographs up on, show them, get them in front of people, the art directors we were interested in, the designers we were interested in, just anybody. You could be doing something like, oh, I love flowers, and to put lots and lots of pictures of flowers with millions of people do, or you could be interested in kumquats. And there's only 1,500 people in the world that are interested, but we could get to them. So social media changed it. And more importantly, at least from my standpoint, we could bypass, we could circumvent the gatekeepers. We were our own creators and things like that. So anyway, social media. As I said, websites started, emails. And we get into Facebook, and we've got pictures. And we're starting to put pictures up and show people exactly what we're doing with our clients and with our own subject matter. It's really very, very incredible change. This is a project that actually started about 5 years ago where I'm photographing, if I throw a baseball, I think that way, right? It's right there, right there. If I throw a baseball, if I was Willie Mays and threw a baseball, I could hit where this building is. And a client came to us, and this is going to be an important factor in what we're talking about. A client came to us and started us to shoot on construction sites. Very different. They were asking for my art, not just progress photographs, but the art. So Facebook and all of that started to create a whole new, now Facebook, we could start to use, not just to communicate, but we could also use them as a platform to show our work. We could develop our own audience. And I said, those 1,500 people that are interested in kumquats halfway around the world, we could get to them. People we never met. Very interesting. So I'm going to take a little bit of a back step here and talk about, we have this amazing commodity, photography. We have a vehicle for sending it around the world, and it becomes the universal language. Think about that. the internet doesn't work in the way that we use it anymore now without photography. It has even surpassed words. We don't need a translator. We don't need a Rosetta Stone. We don't need to be able to talk in a way in which the person that's seeing the photographs understands. We can see in Sri Lanka, they can see these photographs and know what we look like, what we do, how we do it. A universal language, and this has become very, very important in our use of photography. It's really a very, very strong, okay. It is, it has surpassed everything we've ever had in the past for communications. Anyway, we use this internet, and we have Facebook, we have Instagram, we've used all of the platforms, MySpace that doesn't exist anymore. Many of you haven't heard of it, but we have Instagram, the whole thing. So we use these, and now, in order to be able to use them better, our clients are hiring us, and I'm sure they're working photographers here now, where the end product is on social media. So we're not using magazines and newspapers and billboards anymore. We're using social media as the end product for our photograph. So this client, which is the one, I took this picture probably a month ago, and this client is now asking us not only to take pictures, but we convince them. That's all they hired us for, take pictures. We convinced them, no, this is not enough. You need to be able to put your pictures in front of. So we've gone out, and now they have asked us to design the websites. They've asked us to handle much of the social media for them, so that we're taking the pictures and we are getting them in front of. So now the unions all over Boston and environments are now hiring us to take pictures on their sites, because they're different. They're not progress photographs, they're pictures. The workers in the beginning, the first job, I'd go on site and they'd say, "What the hell are you doing here? Don't take my picture. Get out of here. Get out. We don't want you around here." I just came back and back and back, and they realized, and eventually, using the social media, they started to see themselves. So the esprit de corps went up. The client got this right away, all of us, and then the unions. So we've been able to use this kind of thing. This is a job we just did in December and in March. This is in Dominican Republic, right on the border between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. We're shooting cholera. This is Haiti. And the client, we convinced them not only to do stills, but video, and utilize these pictures on social media. We went to them and convinced them to take another step in their promotion. So this is, like I said, this is in Haiti. And then this last part, and I'll get off, I've probably taken up too much time, but is a project that we've been doing for exactly 6 years now. And it's Pan-Africa project. We're photographing every country in Africa. There are 54. We've done 14. It takes forever. But the reason I'm putting this is that we are utilizing, it was created entirely because of social media. I can take people to the country and post every day and show what modern contemporary Africa looks like. It's like a travel log. People can see what really, instead of all the negative we see about Ebola and terrorists, we're showing so people can see what we're seeing. They see the cities, they see the producers, the people, the education, industry, and that's what's happening here. And the last part that Mike asked us to talk about is monetization. We have a computer, we have cameras, we have the ability to go. So we're using crowdfunding. Has anybody heard of that stuff? So we've done 2 Kickstarter campaigns and raised money to do this project. All of this is social media. It was designed, created, platformed, shown, and distributed by that. And I'm gonna let me go. There's a lot more, but next.
So I'm Bruce Martin, and my projects are basically based in the Boston area. I have some in Central America as well. But I started out as an architectural photographer in Boston, and this again is back from the film days. This is the John Hancock Tower, 200 Clarendon they call it now, through the tower of the New Old South Church. And again, I'm using photography kind of to describe the city and show you what I see and what I have found out about the city here. This goes a newer kind of period of time. This is on State Street. This one now was taken with a 4x5 digital camera, which I no longer have because the 35 millimeter digital cameras have become, the quality of it so good. I mean, so much has changed with the advent of digital photography. I mean, again, Instagram, its name itself, it's instant. And the digital, I did a test between film and digital a couple years ago, and when I found out that the film cost me $80 and the quality of the digital was just the same. So anybody can really pick up a camera now and go and take a picture anywhere, anytime. The one thing about a professional, they have to usually come back to get the client to have something that they can use. This is recently taken down on the corner of Mass Ave and Washington Street. And this is going to be the Alexandra Hotel. It was a boutique hotel at one time. And now it's going to be renovated into another hotel. There will probably be a tower. And also you get into some of these things when you photograph in the different areas, like that's actually on the Lower Roxbury side, but the developers say it's on the South End side, and there's all these little nuances to how people promote their own buildings and use the photographs. This is a well-known building that was the Boston 5-cent savings building. It's that brutalist style, modernist style with the Millennium Tower in the background. And also I use this photograph was part of a test to see how you can change, which is better to change your ISO, which is your film speed, versus change your f-stop to see what the quality would be. Again, everything I do mostly is with a tripod. This was taken again with a 5D Canon 5DS. Now this is the Millennium Tower taken from one of the buildings over just behind it there with at sunset. And again, the lighting it always is kind of critical to how successful an image is in the way I work. But just kind of wandering around. This is down on the Rose Kennedy Greenway, and they have neon art up there. And I took this in December of this year, and they rotate through. And if you look at the plaque there, that somehow they got this neon sign from, there's a bunch of them, but this one actually was in Natick, where I live now, and I don't know how somebody gathered them. And so they're constantly changing the artwork down there. This is an interesting, this is a ceiling down on Franklin Street, and what's interesting, this is the same architect who designed the hatch shell on the Esplanade, as Robert Shaw. And the style of this architecture, it's kind of just the beginning of modern, or the modern movement of architecture, but it's still kind of the old Art Deco style. So, but of course, I do a lot of commercial work to pay for it, and this is with a drone. This is by William Ron Architects, and this just won the AIA 2019 Housing Award, and this is out at Brandeis, so for student housing. So the drone has opened up a whole new world of different angles and different possibilities. This is an interior. And again, with these photographs too, they looks kind of very natural, but this is done with multiple exposures and adding people and taking people out and creating kind of the optimum viewpoint to promote your client's view, best interest. This is at dusk, kind of from the other side, looking at it. Again, this is, the 3 images from 2 days of shooting. So a lot goes on the editing floor, as I say. So this, again, is with a drone, and it's also combining images with the drone and merging them together at sunset. Again, I've been having a lot of fun using it. It really takes you to a new place and give you viewpoints that we haven't been possible before. But I do a lot of work, as I said, in Central America, and this is from a project I've done on the caves and cenotes around the Yucatan. And we would have to rappel down in there. And again, I don't use a lot of lighting for even there. Or I used to bring a lot of lighting, as like Lou was saying, but I found now I'm taking lighting away. So in here, I had like a scuba diving light that we were lighting kind of different things. And this is probably from 30 different exposures built to create this cave. And then also the cenotes. So if you're ever in that area, it's a beautiful place to go. You can go swimming in there, and it's a source of water. It's a source of their history. And these cenotes and caves, particularly in this area, were created by the meteorite that destroyed the dinosaurs. And it hit off the northwest coast of the Yucatan. It hit so hard, something like, I don't know, is it 60 million years ago, that it blew out the Earth in a concentric circle around this area here, so it's created these sinkholes. But the Maya have been down in there. This is a hand on one of the caves where they have multiple hands. We're not sure exactly what it means, but it's like ownership or kind of territorial rights. And then I do this kind of work, which is kind of a fragmented landscape approach. So each of those are individual images, and this is a project I've been working on in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And you kind of rebuild the landscape in a different way, and it kind of allows you to see. It kind of really talks a lot about how the camera sees things. So even when you're doing it, because it takes so long to kind of get from the left end to the right end, the weather can change, and you get kind of more of a experience of the time of being there. And then I do the same kind of approach. This is one photograph split around 4 different ways, and you can create these kind of, in this case I did it as kind of, to me it's kind of almost like a building, a person building, so to speak. But you can apply it to, this is one photograph, 9 different ways. 12 different ways. With all the same, one image that's multiplied around. And this is one of the glass towers, which is just down the road in the Seaport District. And then this is really the one that I've been currently working on, and it's, I've been photographing a random street in every neighborhood in Boston. So they're overlapping a little bit, and you go down the street straight on with kind of trying to do a similar light. There's like roughly 25 neighborhoods in Boston, and so I'm in the process. I have one neighborhood left, the Seaport, and then I'll put these together. I mean, the difficult part is the length of them. Some of them, they would be 30 inches high by some of them 30 feet long, just in their natural size. So this is in Dorchester Center, just down the street. And you can kind of see how same building, but different owners or different residents have changed them. So it's kind of its own kind of montage and artwork. So that's a little bit of what I've been up to, and
Hi, thank you for being here this evening. I'm sort of going to approach this more as a personal story, so bear with me. I'm Shree Tamati, and I'm a photographer based out of Arlington. And I've been doing photography for about 24 years, and professionally for 20. I started off being a people photographer, but over time that kind of changed, and I just do that when I'm with family and friends. Now I primarily photograph architecture and interiors for construction companies and architects. My interest in photography actually started in high school, and it was boarding school, and a couple of friends and I would stay up late painting and drawing, and we were introduced to the black and white printing method in the darkroom. So we would be up learning these techniques, and if anyone doesn't know what a darkroom is, it's where we developed physical negatives. So once I got the hang of it, I would spend hours printing, and I really treasured my time in the darkroom. And I spent about 2 years printing other people's negatives. And then when I graduated high school, my mother gave me my first film camera, and I was hooked after that point. But I just picked out 3 of my favorite shots from that very first roll of film that I thought I could share with you. This was one of them, that, and that. So they were very different subjects, very different parts of my life, but it was all on one film strip, so it took almost a year to go through that 36 frames, because I was a great printer, but I was still learning all of this. So I went to art school in India, but at the time they didn't have a program where I could major in photography. So I made my way here to the US, and I'd heard about the Maine Media Workshops in Rockport, Maine. And they had a 2-year program, which I applied for and got into. And there, I certainly learned a lot about art and art history and printing techniques, analog photography, but very little about how to survive on it. But that's, I guess, a topic for another time. So after that, I came to Boston, and I worked at a camera store for about 4 years. Also, simultaneously, I was assisting wedding photographers. Zeph Photo Supply. Do you know it? That was about 4 years, and on weekends, I would assist wedding photographers. It was great to be at the store and learn about the gear and meet photographers who were in the profession, but the wedding photography didn't quite take because it was too fast-paced for me, and I just couldn't find my groove. So I had to figure out what path I wanted my photography to go in. So I bought myself a digital camera, and I quit this job at the store. And digital photography was still very new when I did that. And so I was learning all about it. It was like relearning photography almost. But from that point on, I did wander all over Boston with this camera, trying to figure out. So these next set of photos are from that first venture off into, this was from East Boston, I think, looking into the city. Logan, this is in Charlestown. This, everybody knows that. And this is D Street, Lawn on D, yeah, on D Street. So during this whole process, I realized that there were so many photographers doing newborn and family photography, which is what I thought I wanted to do. So with digital photography, there were a lot of photographers because it was easily accessible. So I guess that was my most trying time because I was doubting my choice of profession, but then it also felt like that was the only skill I had. But on occasion, I would photograph buildings for a couple of friends, but I did it almost as a way to pay the bills and not necessarily as an artistic endeavor. So it sort of evolved from there, and I realized that maybe I am honing these skills, and I used to really enjoy photographing light and texture. I was appreciating the use of space with changing lifestyles, and I was also starting to recognize my response to visual design, and also meeting a lot of interesting people, and I felt like there was always room for growth. And so this sort of led for me to, this was, I think, once I started embracing this idea that I could do architectural photography, and I'm actually enjoying it. These set of photos I took over the past, I want to say 6 years or so, at various locations around Boston. This is a yoga studio. This is a lab. I believe it was Northeastern. That's another auditorium for a company in Cambridge. This is Waverly Hall in Harvard Square, where they converted this old building into condos. This was residential stuff by architects in Concord, Mass. So I did take a break from working when I had children, and I came back into the field about 8 years ago, and that, of course, came with its own challenges, some of which I'm still overcoming. But as I start to gain back some of that independence, I'm able to nudge my career in the direction I want to take it. It's not as quick as I would like it to be, but it's still going in the direction I want it to go, which I needed to make photography unique for myself. So what I did was 5 years ago, I made a workspace in my basement, and I started to mix chemicals because I wanted to be in touch with the tangible nature of photography. So I took up cyanotype photography, which involves treating paper and waiting overnight for it to dry, foraging for plants and leaves with interesting patterns. So it's a long, dedicated process, but the reason I chose cyanotype is that it helps me feel grounded and be connected to nature in a very direct way. But then I had all of these exposures that I had to do something with, so my natural inclination was, because I think about light so much, I turn them into lampshades. So it's going, I'm exploring more home decor with curtains and pillows, but it's still photography. It sort of keeps me, like I was saying, it keeps me grounded. And I'm hoping to keep doing both sorts of photography because I feel like they're very connected. I have to think about spatial design when I'm photographing an interior or making these lampshades. Space is a big thing, and in both instances, I am trying to create a spatial experience, is what I'm doing. So I'm hoping through these two avenues of photography, I meet people and increase my client base, and I have to keep reminding myself that when I get overwhelmed by the world of social media, it's a daily thing. It's almost a necessity. It's a part of daily life. So I guess I'm trying to get more in, like, putting myself out there as I explored these avenues. So social media has almost been like relearning, not just marketing, but what am I doing with my work? How am I showing it to people? And it's definitely important. I'm realizing, and one of the things I'm working on is improving my presence on social media. Along with, I'm making model rooms with cyanotype exposures that I have, which will hopefully become life size someday. And then I'm actually going to India this winter to photograph courtyards in homes. One, because they're beautiful, but also because to illustrate that these designs actually help in reducing footprint. So I'm hoping to be able to illustrate that with my photographs. Thank you.
So I feel like I should have gone first. So I am, in comparison to the other three, I'm primarily like a hobbyist at this point. So I guess what I'll talk about in the next couple images is my general approach to photography and how I feel has kind of like impacted my life, and how I try to use that in order to help with the community work that I'm doing with IG Boston. So this was the Blackstone, I think Blackstone block. So way I got started into photography, it was it was kind of funny. Like I primarily originally was a music artist. I used to do a lot of hip hop music, and I played in a funk band. And so when I was working on like an album cover for my next project, I wanted a backdrop of the Boston skyline. So for research, I was going to all different type of rooftops and take pictures of the Boston skyline. And when I gave it to my artist to kind of work on the cover, he was like, "Hey, well, these pictures are kind of good. You should put them on Instagram." And I was like, "What's Instagram?" This is this is like 2013 or whatnot. So it's a long story short. I got on Instagram and got hooked, unfortunately. But the other part of it was Ghostface Killer of the Wu-Tang Clan actually got me interested in photography. He had mentioned in one of his crazy interviews that musicians see music in colors, as like any kind of musician, when they're listening to something, when they're getting into some kind of mood or some kind of groove with their work, they kind of see it, and not just like tones and melodies or whatnot, but actual like physical colors or whatnot. And I think that also contributes to mood. Like for example, when they say someone is sad, they say someone's feeling blue, right? So for me, I kind of took that in a literal way. Like, how can I use that concept to kind of extrapolate into my work? So the way I got to photography was I was trying to. Okay, cool. Mic check 1 2 1. Thank you. So the way I got into photography was, how can I use that concept to help work on my work? Like, how can I create photography that helps capture not only the mood that I'm seeing, but also like the kind of colors or the kind of vibe that I'm getting into, to see how can I use that to express in my work. So this was near the Fenway, like 6 a.m. in the morning. So this was an example of kind of like the mood I was feeling. Like, this was actually taken on New Year's Day. So like, all right, it's a new day, new year, trying to get started with a new positive outlook. So that's the way I try to approach photography. Like, how can I extrapolate my personality, my characteristics, or just what I'm feeling at the time? How can I use that to fuel what I'm trying to capture in order to capture an image? Because for me, photography is basically like a snapshot of your life, one day at a time, one adventure, one excursion at a time. So by putting them all together, either in a portfolio, in a gallery, or a social media page, you're actually looking at a visual diary of your life, of that time period. Like, if you were to go to your Facebook page or your Instagram page or your Twitter, look at all the images you posted, all the posts that you've written, you're actually seeing like a diary of how you've changed, of how your perspectives, your ideas, your concepts, what you've been exposed to, how that's changed you over the years. So I was hoping to use that to capture like how my mood has changed, how my personality has changed in a more visual sense. And so I'm still trying to work on the concept, and it's been kind of hard for me to do it with what I'm trying to do with IG Boston. But it's a challenge that I think was worth taking, and I'm trying to find new ways to challenge myself in order to keep working on that. This was taken at the BU Bridge. This is again like I think at 4 a.m. in the morning. So this kind of like trying to a new day starting. So trying to get into that new mood, get ready for the new day or whatnot. So once again, you have the the oranges and the reds, and the oranges kind of show you that, like, okay, it's a new day to kind of get ready, but that blue is still kind of like you're feeling the mood from yesterday, from before, and whatever kind of issues or problems you had beforehand kind of coming with you or whatnot. So this was taken at Blue Hill Avenue, and this is a picture that I think was important not only to me but also to my work, because once again, this was taken in Dorchester. So, and what I find personally in the neighborhood, that not a lot of people take pictures in those areas just because for whatever reason or what another. So one of the things I wanted to do is kind of give people exposure to other neighborhoods, other parts of the city, not just, the Back Bay, the Beacon Hills, the Trinity churches, the BU bridges or whatnot. Like, there's other areas, even in your own neighborhood. If you were to take 5 minutes, walk around your neighborhood, I'm pretty sure you'll see something just as interesting and just as gravitating, something that will capture the minds of the people that follow you or want to look at that type of work. So, one of the hashtags we created for IG Boston's was IG Boston Hoods, and that is to promote neighborhoods that don't typically get a lot of exposure within social media or elsewhere, to kind of let people know, like, we want you to feel comfortable. You don't feel like, people are not gonna like your work just because it's not taken from a skyline, or it's not a sunset shot, or it's not a shot of a great, an amazing hotel space, or it's not a shot of what you ate that morning. Like, take a picture of your neighborhood, of the people in your neighborhood, of the landmarks that are important to you in your own neighborhood, so people can understand not only you as a person, but also these cultural landmarks that need to be recognized and represented. So, this was taken downtown. So this is just, downtown buildings. So you see kind of the hustle and bustle of the evening afternoon. So again, trying to capture the mood of, okay, what's a typical afternoon or evening like in Massachusetts? This was taking, I think I can't remember the place exactly, but this was like, I think 7 a.m. in the morning. So, one of the things that I try to do is try to capture pictures or images that capture basically the time of that day. So it kind of give you a good understanding of not only what the place was like, but also what it felt like at that time. So, even if you weren't there, you have a good understanding of what was happening in that space, what was going on in that particular area. So I think, a good photograph is one that kind of captures a good time and place, so you understand and you can kind of actually translate yourself or import yourself into that photograph. This is Kenmore Square. This is basically, someone about to get hit with traffic. 6 p.m., I think. So, again, this kind of like the hustle and bustle of the city, kind of giving the people an idea of, what the city feels like, for the pedestrians, and also kind of give you an understanding of, what an evening is like in Massachusetts. And I think, my particular mood was just like, the day's winding down, so I wanted to capture something that made me feel like, all right, it's time to close up shop and head home. This was taken in Cambridge. This thing was like 5 p.m. So again, it's kind of like an afternoon, evening time. So, you can kind of see like the lights from the cars, people kind of heading home, from the 9 to 5s or whatnot. And I just think with the, with the sky, it kind of exemplifies that, intensity of, the work life of the 9 to 5 period. So give people a good understanding of that. And this was taken, I think right over there somewhere. So, this one, I think kind of spoke to me on a few levels just because, I was remembering the Ferris Bueller quote, life moves too fast, you may miss it. Like, the pedestrians are kind of moving fast and blurry, but things are still kind of standing still. So kind of exemplifies the, the brutalism of the 9 to 5 of the work life, everyone trying to get on the hustle, but, things kind of staying the same. And that's kind of my work. So, like, again, so it's just basically me trying to capture, not only what I think is a good image of that day, but also like how I felt about it, and hopefully to capture that mood in a way that helps others understand not only what I felt, but can kind of actually feel like, if not a music tone, but some kind of melody, some kind of sense to understanding what I was seeing and why I felt that picture was important to me. So that's kind of my bit. Thank you. So I guess right from here, I'll just ask these guys a couple of questions, trying to get their thoughts, and then once I'm done, I'll open it up to y'all. So the first question I wanted to ask y'all was, one of the things that I've heard a lot about from, more recent photographers is that they feel like their, social media presence is kind of almost like a portfolio nowadays. Instead of, just posting pictures of, your dog and your family on Christmas Eve or whatnot, they actually try to approach it in a more professional sense. Like, this is how I want my clients to see me. So with that kind of concept or perspective, I wanted to kind of hear how you felt about that, and how do you think it affects your work, like far as using social media as a way to promote yourself or identify yourself? Anyone want to start?
Well, one thing I've noticed with it, from doing it, it's interesting to see what images get more likes than others. And you kind of like, one, you think, well, that should get a lot of likes, and it doesn't. And apparently they're going to get rid of the likes, or I don't know if they already have.
Yeah, they're planning on it.
Yeah, so anyway, that's one thing I've kind of noticed, and you try and direct your clients to it, but also as well, your website has a lot of that same material, maybe in more depth, but I think I might be transitioning more over to the Instagram approach and doing both, or I do a lot of email marketing as well, so that's been good.
How about you? How do you feel about that, Lou?
It's a complicated question, but I find that the platforms, whether they be, and I'm going to include email, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all have different audiences, and I find that that's very important. In the case of Jesus, I'm really pulling us out, but say your website is for a sort of formal kind of thing. Facebook, I'm literally able to, as I mentioned, do a travel log, as say in Africa, or even any assignment I get. I'm almost always Facebooking where I am, and so if I'm in Japan or whatever it is, I'm doing that. So I'm using Facebook as hey, I'm busy, guys. I'm still working. I'm doing this kind of thing. So that's like that kind of thing. But Instagram, we're finding that, say an example of the Pan-Africa, we're finding that people in Africa are finding us, people I've never met who are coming to us and looking at the pictures because they understand what I'm trying to do. Whereas in America, and to be truthful, we don't care about Africa in the United States. We could care less. So but they are saying this is, an interesting way, and so they're able to look at it. But we're literally treating each one separately as a different audience, different platform, different kind of photograph, and things like that. So it really has become like we're using the thing for we call it ironclad photo, which is the construction stuff. We've actually the client has allowed us to create we're using, but that's a completely different body of work. Goes to a completely different audience and things like that, So I don't know if that answers your question, but
that answers it greatly. Thank you. What about you, Shree?
I think I find that having a website and having a majority of your work there to sort of show what you're doing is really important to have. The way I use Instagram, I'm only on Instagram. I have LinkedIn. I'm hardly on Twitter. But with Instagram, it's just a way for me to show that I am around and this is what I do, and to show what I'm doing for my clients. But lately, it's also turned into a kind of a marketing thing. So if a client of mine tags me, they put up a picture I took for them and they tag me, their architect might call and say, hey, I want to buy those photos. So it's almost like I don't have an option to not put them up on Instagram because I might get work out of it, or I might be able to reach a wider audience. So it is kind of a portfolio, but I don't use it as a portfolio. I use it more as marketing. Yeah.
Cool, awesome. So I guess part of a transition to that question, how has your work with clients changed over the years, since now that everything is kind of, I think Lou, you had mentioned as far as now you can kind of skip the art director and kind of post stuff directly and get that audience. So how has your techniques, your editing styles, just your way to do photography changed now that everything's become more digital? Anyone want to give it a shot?
I don't feel like my style has changed because considering how long I spent photographing film and then feeling really hard, like having a difficult time letting go of it, I still work very hard to get it right in the camera. I do very little work on the computer because I don't enjoy that part very much. So it hasn't changed a whole lot. Yeah.
Well, for myself, I shoot a lot more because, you know, there's really no added costs except for your time of editing, and you have more choices and people expect a lot more. I mean, now, again, for an architectural shoot, the shoot, an 8-hour shoot, again, with the way I work, can be like a week of digital processing, and that's what Sarah was saying about with the computer time. It can get excessive, but it's kind of become my approach and my style, so I deal with that all the time. So really the one thing is, though, that there's not that cost of the film. There's also that immediacy of seeing while you're looking back at the back and you're going, well, this is good, or we should try that. So it allows you to explore ideas in a more complete, in-depth way.
Awesome. How about you, Lou?
It's been dramatic. The change has been dramatic. I've always been interested, I guess that's sort of a stylistic thing, but interested in the image being the only thing I'm interested in. You know, I mean, you have to always be interested in the client and economics and how, but the image is something I'm always striving to just figure out how to make a better image. But digital and social media has given me the ability to experiment a lot more. You know, when you had to hold a light meter up and take a picture, and then you had to pay for bracketing and editing and stuff like now I can go and I can stick a camera 6 inches from a subject's face and back off. I can do all kinds of things. So it has tremendously changed the way I'm able to follow a narrative or a series of photographs. And I think that has been a tremendous change in the way. I love it, you know, just love the ability to be able to do more and more that way.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right, so then one of the other questions I was interested in is, like, you know, especially, you know, for our community photographers, one of the frequent topics of discussion is about, like, you know, what is a photographer nowadays, you know, especially since, you know, cameras are basically ubiquitous. Everyone has the ability to take a really good shot, as opposed to, like, an artist who still needs some technical skill to actually create a good, like, artwork. Like, you know, a photographer with just a decent enough camera and a decent enough sunlight, they can take an amazing shot regardless of their level of expertise. So what are y'all thoughts regarding, like, you know, what is a photographer? Like, what separates a professional photographer from a hobbyist? Like, do any of y'all have any thoughts on that? Like, I'll start with you, Lou.
There was a comedian on TV recently who said, you know, and I don't know why he started on photography. He said, isn't it photography? It's all this social media. And he says, I have a photograph of my grandfather who's standing next to Charles Lindbergh. He says Charles Lindbergh had just flown across the Atlantic and he was being touted in ticker tape parades, and my grandfather was standing. He says, but me, I got a picture of my breakfast. You know, so I think that's not my joke, somebody else's. But I think that we still, I was going to talk about it there, but you know I was running long, but we still have to worry about, and I do at least, relevance. You know, are we taking a picture of our ham and eggs? You know, or are we using this for better expression of our own internal thoughts? Are we satisfying a client? All of that. So relevance really has. And the other point is that you're right. And I love the Catholic, small c, ability that anybody can take a picture. I've always thought that the fact that somebody can express themselves, whether they're taking a picture of a flower or going and curing disease around the world with their camera, was an important, and anybody can do it and pick it up. But now we have our cell phone and people are taking pictures of everything. I would be willing to bet 90% of it are totally irrelevant. And that is a component that, and again, you know, if it's an expression, but it's a component of, so it is still quality. You know, the most clients are still pulling those Twitter accounts or pulling those Instagram when they see something that answers their client's need, but it's usually something a little bit better and stuff like, and that part we just have to weed through a lot more to get to those pictures.
Great. How about you?
Well, yeah, I think Lou's, that's right about that. With also too, it's a lot of editing to kind of trim it down to the quality. I mean, the one main difference I see between kind of a professional and amateur, I mean, anybody will really kind of happen onto a good photograph, but if you have to be there on a certain day and come back with something that's going to be important and relevant to your client, that's where, you know, being a professional, and you learn kind of tricks of the trade, and you understand what you're looking for and what you're capable of doing, and you apply all those to, like with laser kind of concentration on it, and out of it, hopefully, comes something that was useful and also intriguing to the client.
How are you, Shree?
I think there's a couple aspects to that. One is being a professional in anything, you know, you need to build relationships. You need to be that person that your client can call and know that you're going to deliver what they want. But also, like, are you true to your work? Like, what it means to you? Are you doing it for the right reasons? I feel like those are questions you have to ask yourself. And also, if I want to do this long term, I cannot rely on like a couple of pictures that will get a lot of likes on Instagram. I have to work through and make sure that what I'm putting out there means something to me. It means something to my client. And they want to call me back because of how I'm expressing what this means to me. So it goes much more beyond just making the image. It's like, why are you making it and how are you going to sustain it for a very long time? If you want to make it a professional thing, I want to be doing this for the next 50 years. But in order to do that, I have to find the people and keep them and make sure I'm taking the right steps to do that.
So you try to cultivate like a personal relationship with the client in order to...
Yeah, with the client, but also like making sure that my work means something to me. Like, I don't want to just go out there and if a client hires me to do something, I'm not just going to go there, take a bunch of pictures and give it to them, because they'll see that it's, you know, it's okay. It doesn't come through, you know what I mean? So if I spend all that time doing technically, sure. So yeah, I guess I kind of made my point, yeah. So it's just building relationships goes very far.
So I just was going to, on kind of the same idea, is at a certain point, you know how to do it. It's what you end up choosing to do becomes important. What you decide to spend your time concentrating on becomes the most meaningful aspect of it.
Can I follow up on that? Like, how do you choose what to do? Like, how do you kind of actually make that decision to say, this is the project that I want to work on?
Well, after you've been doing a number of different projects, you kind of look into them and explore. And I think sometimes too, like with the way I'm working with the layering and the multiple images, is that you come up with a solution, and then you try and find the problem, and it's kind of reverse engineering. And once you do it and you do it for a while, it seems like with these projects they never end. You know, you keep adding. And you kind of rotate through, and you do one, and then you drop it for a while, and you do something else, and you come back to it. But certain current events, like I've been photographing a lot of the demonstrations and rallies down on the commons, and that just, you know, motivated by politics of the time, and try and incorporate that into your work. And you just look at different things, and you're trying to always, you know, one of the things I've always kind of felt like, for me to kind of relate to things, I like to create things, so it's kind of a process for me.
And Bruce, I know you had mentioned on your website that you also like take photographs of like endangered buildings in order to make sure they're preserved or whatnot.
Well, I started out in upstate New York as they're called a historic preservation photographer, and documented houses really. Upstate New York is kind of economically depressed area. I mean, it hasn't really come out of any of the recession. So you photograph these older buildings to help either get them on the National Register to protect them, or to document them before they just kind of deteriorate. So I've been doing that, and this is, again, that's something that I carry on. Like I photographed that Alexandra hotel, and again, I just showed one picture, but I did multiple different viewpoints of it, and it's just something that I kind of find interesting, the way the light falls on older building. I love the textures. I love the way they sit in the landscape, and I try and, you know, connect to them in that way.
So you're drawn to it as an architect?
I wouldn't say more. I think as a kind of an artist, really more. But it's seeing when I'm working for an architect, my main thing is to try and accent the positive of what they did and negate any of the negatives to bring forth, because they use those on their website. But when you're doing, again, if you're doing it for a magazine and it's an editorial, then you try and be like more realistic on how it's sitting in the landscape, and you know, everything's editing, you know, and again, you're editing with what lens you use, what time of day you do, where you stand, how high you stand, what, you know, just so many different aspects. But again, when you've done it long enough, you really aren't thinking about that when you're taking the picture. You're responding to what you feel, and trying to connect to the subject matter at hand.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so Lou, I have a question for you regarding like the projects that you've photographed, like the Pan Africa project and the Death Row project. I wanted to kind of, since they're like humanitarian causes in a sense, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts regarding like why you feel it's important to do that, and what is like the purpose or intent to kind of give those areas of humanity exposure.
Well, to tell the story, I'm going to go back a number of years, and I remember I was standing in the middle of 2 studios ago, and I had my employees all around me, and they were working on computers and typing out and sending out bills and stuff like that, and and I mean, as the head of the thing, I wouldn't do anything, I was just looking around, and I'm looking at, I've had a great staff, and I was standing there saying, what am I going to be known for? What is my legacy? What am I, that computer I took for the cover of the XYZ annual report, I mean, is that what they're going to hold up at my, in my funeral or whatever it is? I said, I don't want, I said, I got into this, we go to school for it, we learn it, we start taking pictures so that we can do something, again, I'm going to use the word relevant. And I'm saying we're doing pretty well with the commercial work, but is this all there is? And so I started to look into, and I said, I started in photography to put a couple of Leicas around my neck and go cure the ills of the world. And am I doing that? So then I started to really look into finding out how I could supplement my career by looking into things that I was interested in. And we talked also about that universal language. I didn't know that that's what it was at the time, but I was using something that I did as a vehicle to show people, and I was taking one step more, and that was I was trying not to follow trends. I was trying to look at subject matter that nobody else was doing. So that's where death penalty, Japan back in the day when we were, I was going every year and shooting every year for clients and things, Pan Africa, because as I said, nobody in the United States cares about Africa except to say, okay, we got to worry about Ebola or poverty or something, and it's a vibrant country. Here's my political sell here. It's a kind of neo-colonialism by only showing the negative going on in a continent of 1 billion people in order to be able to better control. And I said, this is wrong. I've got my little neck of the woods, I'm going to try to take a few pictures and see if I can't change that. So, again, I'm not sure I'm answering the question. I'm being very political, but the point is that that's where it started in this. I wanted my photographs to mean something to somebody.
And what about you, Bruce? Shree? Any thoughts regarding that? Like, far as what you want to do with your photography, how you wanted to like outlast or anything of that nature?
Well, I mean, I got plenty of time left, so I don't have time to be thinking about that, I hope. But I have kind of started putting all my files onto hard drives, and I will distribute them to my children, and they can deal with them as they want. But you do want to try and make a difference. That's one of the reasons why I kind of got into photography, more for the kind of the compelling nature of it. And then I realized that the cheapest way really to do it is to do it professionally, because that will help pay for everything. And from there, my work has always kind of been connected to both my personal and architectural photography.
How about you, Shree? Any thoughts?
I guess my politics is at home right now. I'm trying to raise 2 empathetic children. But I mean, like I was saying earlier, I think it's just important for me to do this as long as I can do it. I don't know if it'll change the world, but with my cyanotype stuff, I do workshops, and I try to workshops for children, and I try to spread that kind of thing where you can do work that's pretty and it's fine. It's because you need more beauty in the world, so why not?
I mentioned earlier that you had taken a break from photography from a while, then you came back. So I wanted to kind of get your thoughts regarding like that process, or what you were thinking in regarding that period.
Well, part of it is I wanted to keep doing photography, and I guess I'm taking some of this from experience of my own parents, where they definitely spent a lot of time working and taking care of us. So when it was time for us to leave the home, they were a little bit lost, and I didn't want to be lost. I didn't want to be in that place where my kids are not there, they're not my work anymore, or they're not, it's not an active part of my daily life, which I needed to hold on to that because that's just a part of me. And so I just got out there and I started making cold calls, emails, I'm here, call me, I'm here, call me. So, and that's still happening. But it was definitely a conscientious decision to be like, I'm not going to let too much time pass. I mean, I was taking pictures of them when they were babies, but it's not enough. It's not satisfying. It's not my thing. So, and that's part of why the cyanotype lampshade started to happen, is in this field, you have to keep redefining yourself. I mean, you're blasted with images every single day. And being on social media, one of the things is, it's also good for me to look at those images because it helps to see what people are doing and what's important. And I know I value the architectural photography I do, but I get a really amazing response with the cyanotype stuff. And so that's something that keeps me going too. You can hear people sigh when they see it. So I love that. And I know that I need to keep doing this.
Do you feel like that's a result of you finding the right audience for it? Do you feel like they actually see what you're trying to create? Like, what do you think
I think I think part of it is the uniqueness of it, the process. There are definitely a lot of photographers out there doing analog photography, alternative process photography with chemicals and all of that, but sort of bringing it to the forefront and like making it available to people in their homes makes a lot of difference. And I think everybody loves something handmade. And so it started off with the lampshades, and then I went to the Artisan Asylum and learned woodworking and electrical work, so now I have to build the whole thing.
You're making them yourself.
I'm making the whole thing. But I'm doing it because I want to, and I love it, and people love it, because I think it comes from a very authentic, genuine place.
Yeah, great, thank you. So I wanted to also ask y'all, what are your, I guess, advice you would have for someone who kind of wants to make the transition from a hobbyist photographer to a professional in this day and age? Because now with everything digital, it's not like how it was when you first started. So from your experience in working in this field, building with your clientele, like what kind of thoughts or advice you would have for a budding photographer or starting photographer to kind of make that transition? I guess I'll start with you, Lou.
You know, the answer I would give a few years ago is very different from the answer I give now. I believe that we're being taught, us old people are being taught by a much younger generation that is in fact utilizing these social media platforms in a much more different world that we would have never imagined. You know, it is crowdsourcing. They are getting likes, as you mentioned, but they're getting likes and building these enormous audiences in order to show the work. Hopefully some of the work is halfway decent. That is something that we can learn, hopefully learn to do that better. And that's a new technique. What do they call them? Influencers and things like that, you know? Well, I've seen people do that very well and do it abysmally. But if those people are doing well and finding ways to get their pictures into places, and they have to be proactive about that. That's what we've been. We've gone and made our clients do websites, promote them to do these things. We've gone and to get the secondary uses of those same pictures that we took and put on and develop an audience. We develop our own audience. That's an amazing power. And being able to have those people, but we have to do something, whether it be something old and crotchety like books, exhibitions, using, you know, all of these other workshops. You know, these devices can be used to promote those kinds of things and to make so that they can make that transition from just somebody who has a whole lot of followers to somebody who's actually, you know, the clients are coming to influencers and saying, hey, can you know, make sure you wear our shoes, make sure you wear our clothes, make sure you go on our vacation. But they'll give you a vacation, but we ran into somebody a couple of years at Photo Expo. You know, does anybody know Photo Expo? Anyway, it's a big convention down in New York. We've done, and the guy came up and said, hey, we're influencers, and we're doing cars, we're doing big, you know, so Mercedes and BMW are coming to us, and they're giving us a car, and we can take our photograph. I said, oh, that's extraordinary. I said, oh, yeah. Well, he says they're giving us about $150 to do it, and I was like, I wouldn't try to get an assistant to work for $150. So we have to figure out how to do that better. But the fact that they have these audiences, the clients are coming to them, and we need to be able to figure out how to use that better.
Awesome. What about you, Bruce? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I guess the one thing, if you're going to be a photographer today, I think you also have to be like a web designer, a copywriter, and just a whole bunch of other attributes, because there's so much competition specifically for photography or photographers that I think to stand out now, I think you have to bring, I think the people that are adding video to it, because video has become a big time, and time-lapse photography, and also being good on the computer and with Photoshop. So you have to have this whole package that you can deliver to the client. I mean, there's really, again, in terms of photography, you know, like there's a saying, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day, but Rome wasn't photographed in a day. And there's always one more photograph to take. And I think the idea is to get it out there with multiple skills so your client base will build. And also, I think networking is really important.
What about you, Shree?
I think, I mean, social media is a wonderful platform and I think people who are of younger generation than me are using it really, really, really well. And I have a lot to learn from that. But I mean, I think, you know, still in order to continue being in this profession, I mean, you just have to keep doing what feels right to you. And yeah, reach, again, like I was saying earlier, building those relationships.
Awesome. Okay. So last question before I open it up. So, and this is just me being curious. So, what place in the world would you recommend someone to kind of shoot? Like, if you had any place in the world to choose from to shoot a photograph, where would it be? I'll go with you, Shree. You first.
That's a tough question to answer. There is so much to see. From my experience, I really enjoyed photographing Mexico very much. There was a lot of different things going on. People were amazing, and I really enjoyed that. And Iceland, yeah.
What about you, Bruce?
Well, anywhere and everywhere, but Paul Strand, I think one time said he had photographed around the world, and he's decided the best photographs were just on his doorstep. And so, I mean, look close, look far, and see what you can find.
Learning how to take pictures of, I did an exhibit years ago, and I called it Four Corners, Four Continents. And it had to do with being able to photograph my own backyard and my neighborhood and things like that. And the long-term stuff, the faraway stuff. Like, you could do it all right up there.
Thank you. Okay, good. So I think that's all the questions I had, but I wanted to kind of open it up to see if anyone in particular had any questions they wanted to ask the photographers, just to make sure we had that opportunity. Oh, we got Matt over there. I guess I'll bring the mic over. Hold on.
Hello. Hello. So I'm one of those deemed quote-unquote influencers, but not by myself. And I've been starting to be asked by lots of brands to do photo work for them. But the thing is, I went through 7 years of art school, and not one class, not 1 minute was talked about how do I offer pricing? How do I price my work? How do I actually run a business as an artist? You would think after all those many days and countless hours that might have been discussed, but it hasn't been. So how do you approach pricing, and how do you even go about that as somebody who's starting off? That's my question. Go.
I think I started off, I have a lot of photographer friends, so we compare notes a lot. And it's important to have that community. To have other photographers who are your very good friends is really important. And then we would figure out what worked for everybody and how clients responded. But I have taken a lot of workshops about business and how to be a better business. It doesn't end with art school. In fact, that's where you begin learning this. Yeah, you just have to sort of know what the market is and how, all the skills you're putting forth. Like you might have to build a website and take pictures and do something else. You have to add on all that, and more importantly, like put that value on your work. And people want to see that you are valuing what you're doing. Never underprice yourself. That's like the biggest thing. People will not hire you if you underprice yourself.
Well, I think with pricing too, there's kind of two aspects. I mean, if you're hired to photograph something, there's kind of your fee for whatever they're going to use it for, their usage fee, and then you have your assistant, your mileage, and digital processing, and that comes up to a number. And then there's also when you do your fine art pricing. And again, on both of them, you do want to maintain your value. You don't want to give it away. And once you set one price, you can't really drop it, but you can always increase it. So you kind of find that spot where you think you can meet your expenses and sell the work.
How about you?
I'm going to be going against the grain again. I helped start a couple of schools that photography was the main thing, and we would always try to include the financial aspects of what the pictures were worth and how to charge. The students wouldn't show up on those days. All right, so it becomes a whole thing. But I didn't have nothing to base my like yourself, you know, what do you charge? And, you know, of course, I probably undercharged a lot. But there are vehicles, there are associations, the ASMP, the PP of A, all of these things that are out there that have extremely complex, thorough things, and now we have stuff you can go and Google online and find out. But people call me all the time asking them how much to charge. It's a pain in the butt. Because it's a 2-3 hour conversation, all right? Because you say, okay, charge $100, and you know oh, that's too much, or that's too little, or whatever. It's always going to be that way. You charge as much as you possibly can that client. You know, that's how the system works. Experience allows you to be able to hold on and predict what your client can afford. You always have to charge enough to make, you know, so I say, take the list. This is what are my expenses? You're gonna rent a car, you're gonna drive your own, you rent assistant, models, you're gonna, you know, all of those expenses. You're gonna mark it up. Oh, you can't know how many people. Oh, I just charge them exactly. No, you mark them up. You can't be the bank for, you know, Fortune 500 company. And then you start to say, how much do I need to make on top of this in order to make this worthwhile? That's not a good answer, but it really is a good place to start, because, you know, I mean, I've done a lot of jobs where the expenses are 2 and 3 times what I make on the job. And I tell my clients, I say, you know, if I charge you that much, I'm paying you. And that's a big part of what, you know. So, but yeah, it's a big question. But like, students just wouldn't come to the class.
Does anyone have any other questions?
How do you curate your photographs?
By edit, you mean, or?
Collect a number of photographs
Or-
for assignment or personally.
Right. Oh, how do I store them and?
How do you collect them for later?
Well, again, a lot has changed in that. I mean, I have cabinet fulls of 4x5 negatives and slides, and I guess we probably all do that. It shot from the traditional days, but these days you take the files, and when they're done and they've gone to the client, or they're in their finished form, what I do is I back them up onto a hard drive, and then I make 3 copies of it. And I should store 3 in each separate place, but I store in 2 different places, one at my studio and one at my house. And then I have a library program that can only work now on an older Mac called Portfolio. And if I want to look for something, I can go and I put in a keyword, and it will bring it up. And I don't know, I'm up to like 20 gigabytes of images in that system. But I still have all the old negatives and transparencies, and at some point I'll have to find something to do that. Plus, you know, once you create something, like for shows and exhibits, if it hasn't sold, it has to go somewhere. So you're storing it everywhere. I mean, I used to print almost everything that I would do, and now I don't do that anymore, because it just ends up being in a acid-free box until you try and find it, and then you can't find it, so you have to print it again. So so it's really that's a big issue for photographers, storing their files. And again, if the hard drive fails and you don't have a backup on it, I mean, that's why I tell everybody in photography, one of the biggest things you can do is back up your working files and then back up your finished files in multiple hard drives. And I also buy 2 different types of hard drives, just in case if you buy 3 of the same brand, if that brand fails, it would, you know, by having 2 different brands, you have a chance that one of them might work. But then I've been told that it's basically the same hard drive maker that's selling them, and they're putting them in different cases, so who knows? I mean, again, they said CDs wouldn't last very long, and all my CDs still, but I store them in dark and in cases, so I don't know.
It's definitely become easier to store digital files. You're not worried about moisture anymore, so that helps. But yeah, backing up on various hard drives is a really important thing. And of course, the cloud. I always keep a copy that's easy to access because it's there. But like all the raw files, the original files are all backed up multiple times.
How about you, Lou? Any thoughts on that?
I'm going to go against everybody again. If you come to my studio, there's an entire wall, almost 5 feet high, flat files this thick, with almost 1 million slides. Anybody ever heard of slides? 1 million slides. And all of them are, used to put, this is years ago, put the TV on 11 o'clock at night when all of my, and hand write on the slides where it was, what was in the photograph. Do you know how long that takes? It's years. So we have those. Now it's digital, and we do the exact same thing. It's backed up 3 times at least, hard drives, cloud, all of these places where we're putting these photographs so that if something gets corrupted, we're able to do that. But I'm going to really burst your bubble. I used to bring 6 curators, lawyers, gallerists, all kinds of people to my studio like once a month to talk about legacy. We breached on it just, what do we do with all these things once we are no longer able to do anything with them? Or, okay, our whole life flashes in front of your eyes, and what do you do with these millions of photographs? And people are saying we're backing them up and we're putting them on hard drives and we're taking the prints and scanning them, and gallerists will not take any of that. They couldn't care less. If it's not a print, they've got no use for it, and it's got to be signed. So it depends a lot about what you want to do with your imagery. Are you a fine art photographer? Are you dealing with clients? I know people who have thrown away a goodly portion of their career because the pictures are old and nobody wants them and stuff like that. So, you know, and this gentleman says he's putting them on hard drives and saddling, and he's going to saddle his kids with what to do with it, you know. I ain't doing that to my daughter. All right, so we have to figure out, and it's not, you know, I'm, again, not answering your question, but these are the issues of when I have said to every class I've ever taught to my students, it is your responsibility to take care of your pictures. Oh, I got a cell phone, I got a nice camera, I got a couple of boxes of slides. You know, I can remember, I said, you got to write that stuff down. I said, you can believe me, 20 years from now, you won't remember, you know, if you don't do it now, and then you have to figure out how to store it, climate controlled. These things decay. Putting them in, he says, acid-free boxes, all of that stuff. You have to use the right pens and pencils, because anybody use a magic marker on their pictures? A couple of years it's going to be nice and brown and eat through, all right? So we have to go for archival, you know, mats, the kind of mats you put on your, you know, acid-free papers and stuff like that. I'm going on and on and on, but these are the unbelievable problems that we have and like I said, no gallery. We just donated 2 portfolios to libraries recently, and what we had to go through, but they only want prints. Years ago I said, oh, I got all the slides from every neighborhood in Boston, would you like them? She says, we'd like them, but you got to make prints. I wasn't going to do that, all right. So, sorry, that's right.
All right, anyone else have any questions? Anyone they like to ask? No? Cool. I did have one more question. Just one more. We got like 5 minutes, so. I wanted to ask regarding like feedback. Like, how do you guys get like feedback for your work? And, you know, because I know like, you know, you've probably dealt with other peers, colleagues in the past, so how do you actually talk to each other about, you know, your work and what you're putting out and things like that?
Are you talking about with other photographers or for your
Like
clients
your
and
own
stuff?
work. Like how do you?
Well,
like,
you
look
get
for
feedback automatically from your clients if they hire you again. That's the kind of feedback that you want. They don't hire you again, then you try and find out exactly what went wrong, or what can you do better on other jobs for future. And over the years, you kind of collect all that information, and it kind of develops your persona. But you talk to other photographers, you show your work to curators, gallery people, and everybody. It's funny. I remember showing some work at my studio, and I had 2 different portfolios up, and one woman came in and said, "This is the one you should really concentrate on." And I'm going, "Oh, yeah, maybe." And then the next person came in and goes, "This is the other portfolio. This is the one you should concentrate on." So I think in the end, really, you got to trust your own judgment and really follow your own vision.
You, Shree?
I think there's a couple places. There's Griffin Museum of Photography in Winchester, where they have portfolio reviews. So you go with prints and you can show your stuff and you get feedback on that, which I found to be pretty valuable. And there's also a couple of places in Boston that do that, like, I'm forgetting the name. Susan, what's the college? Yes, the PRC, yeah, they do the same thing. So I think no matter how far you've gotten in your work, it helps to show people the work, like physically, prints, and hear what they think, and then you look at other people's work, which is also helpful. And then, yeah, repeat clients. Repeat clients are the best feedback.
You, Lou.
I think you make a good point. If you get a phone call, if you get the second phone call, you've probably done something right. But as artists, I think we're trying to push the envelope beyond what, and it's really, really, really complicated. Your friends, family, even colleagues are rarely, I found, of much use. They're always going to pat you on the back. You have an exhibit, everyone, "Oh, you're such a great photographer." That's worthless. It's totally worthless. I mean, we want that. We want to be. I have an ego. I want to. "Oh yeah, I'm so cool." I want people to like my work, and tell me so. But it's not really useful to push. So you have to. What's the phrase? We have to keep our own counsel. Is that the right way? We have to. If you're doing work, you're getting decent response from your clients. You're getting people. And you're really constantly pushing hard, you're going to be out in front of everybody in terms of seeing your photographs. And that's one of the problems that you're going to constantly have, whereas the feedback is really hard to come by. And you have to get to a point where you are the one that's really talking about, not talking about, or really, I think that your point of, I have been asked to do portfolio reviews and be a reviewer, and I try my damnedest to say something constructive about somebody, to point them in directions that of work that's been similar, because I've seen virtually every photograph that's ever been taken. I've been doing this so long. I know that's a big ego thing, but I've seen lots of it. So I'm able to say, "Hey, you ought to take a look at so-and-so over here. This work is similar, see what they're doing." I don't think many people take that advice, but that's okay. But as your own, you're so, as an artist, a real artist, you're so isolated about creativity, You're pushing, just trying to do something a little different, a little harder, a little better, and, dragging hopefully people who will like it behind you.
Awesome, thank you. So I guess that's pretty much all the time we have. So I want to thank you guys for taking the time out to speak with us. And I learned a lot, and I'm pretty sure everyone else in the crowd here as well. So thank you once again. I really appreciate you having you here. And yeah, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. So just a couple of shameless plugs and promotion here. So make sure to follow us on IG Boston. I'm gonna tag all these guys today, so so that way, in case you want to follow them too, you can find their social media handles on our website, on our Instagram page. And a couple of more announcements. We'll be also doing photography classes at Northeastern University sometime soon, probably like a month or so. So if you're interested in learning a bit more about photography, more technical aspects, or more about what other people in the community are doing, you can kind of stay tuned for those classes because we'll be announcing those soon. We'll also be trying to host another gallery event in the next couple of months. I'm not sure if you're familiar with our gallery events. If you're not, we basically print about 200 photos from community members here in Boston to kind of showcase to goers about what the community is doing, the kind of creativity that's here in Boston. So if you're interested to see what more creative artists are doing in the area, make sure to follow that event and follow us to hear more news about that. Just stay tuned for more Insta Meets, more talks like this. We'll be inviting other photographers, and we'll make sure we'll try to involve these guys in some form or fashion. So once again, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. We'll hang around a few minutes in case you have any questions. You can check out our snapshot gallery of our photos from the gallery event from last year right over there if you're interested in more stuff, and have a great night. Thank y'all.
Thank you. You did a great job.